welcome to this webinar on how to take care of your mental health with nutrition and other lifestyle interventions. So firstly, I want to welcome Dr. Maricia Coertze. So she's a medical doctor and she's very qualified and experienced, especially in the fields of aesthetics and functional medicine. So thank you so much for joining us today, and it really is an honor to be able to take on this topic with you today. And I'm Zena le Roux. I'm a functional nutritionist, investigative health journalist, and also a health coach. So we won't keep you long today. We are planning on only being around maybe half an hour, so we're going to start straight away. Okay, so when we think of treating mental illnesses, we often neglect what role the physiological issues in the body might play. And I find it quite shocking that mental health issues have really increased dramatically over the past decade, and especially in young adults. So today we're going to talk about why our collective health, mental health, seems to be suffering so much, and what we can do about this. So I want to start out with a bit of a broader focus, and we're going to start by focusing on the microbiome. So the microbiome is the bacteria that lives within all of us. And many researchers believe that about 90% of all disease can be traced back to the microbiome and our gut health, right? So this is our digestive health. And it has also been shown that the genome or the DNA in our microbiome outnumber the DNA in our human bodies. So the DNA in our bacteria outnumber the DNA in our bodies by about 100 to 1. So this means that there's 100 times more DNA in our bacteria than there is in our human bodies, in our human cells, right? Okay, so and this I find really revolutionary, because if we understand this and if we can treat the microbiome well and things like that, all sorts of genetic diseases could actually be treated and prevented and even cured. So there's many clients who come to me telling me, I've got this genetic disease, but there's nothing I can do about that. That's kind of common knowledge. There's nothing we can do about genetic diseases. So if we know this, there's actually quite a few things we can do, and we can maybe find some solutions around this. So, Dr. Maricia, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this and what you think the role of the microbiome is when it comes to disease in general.
Hi, Zena. No, that's absolutely true what you're saying. To be exact, we have about 20,000 different genes in our bodies, and bacteria amount to about 20 billion different genes. So it's actually quite more than 100. And it's quite strange, actually, that we're only really looking into the importance of the microbiome with human health now, because more than 2,500 years ago, Hippocrates, like the father of modern age medicine, said that all disease starts in the gut. And it's absolutely true. Even with my own patients, that's where we usually focus first, is to get the gut health right. Because like you said, the microbiome in general, it consists of bacteria, fungi, viruses, and hopefully not parasites as well. And all of these organisms make up your microbiome. And we are kind of in a symbiotic relationship with them, where we give them a house to live in and we give them food to eat, and they make various things like hormones, vitamins, minerals, neurotransmitters, all of these things that we need for health, they provide for us. And unfortunately, due to the modern evolvement, as if I can call it that, of our lifestyles, we've seen that our microbiome has also been affected by that, leading to large amounts of inflammation. And that's kind of where we sit at the moment, or today, where years and years of a poor lifestyle have caused all these negative biological effects that cause chronic disease. And many people often find or manifest with these diseases far down in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and that's actually where all of your old age diseases come from, because they have a direct effect on the immune system, the hormone system of the body, brain function, nervous system, everything is linked to the microbiome.
Yeah, so it's this bidirectional communication between the gut and the brain, right? And it kind of intersects with branches of the hormonal and immune system. So it's quite a complex and a very elegant system.
Yes.
But let's bring this back to mental health. So I know that the microbiome has a huge impact on how we feel and also our state of mind. And this is because of this relationship, right? So could you maybe tell us a bit more about this relationship and how it works?
Yeah, it's actually quite shocking. There's research that directs the evolutionary development of the brain to the physical cells in the colon. So they think that the mammalian, like we are all mammals, or the mammal brain is derived from a colon, like intestinal cells. So if you just think about that, like our brain is actually our gut and our gut is our brain. So yes, the gut is directly linked to the brain. We call this the gut-brain axis, okay? And basically the intestines are connected to the enteric nervous system. So that's the nervous system that's concentrated around the intestines or the abdominal area. And then that enteric nervous system is then connected to the vagus nerve, which is one of your cranial nerves, which goes straight to the brain. So the vagus nerve is kind of the bridge between the gut and the brain. And there are many ways that they suggest that the gut communicates with the brain. None of them are really 100% concrete. That's very fresh research that's going on. But there are various routes that they think the gut communicates with the brain, and by stimulating the vagus nerve. And we have the neuropod cells. These are actually quite new cells that they've discovered that are little pods that sit inside the intestinal lining, through which the bacteria directly stimulate the vagus nerve. Then you get your hormone and your neurotransmitter secretion, and by the organisms inside the gut that then indirectly stimulate the vagus nerve. Then there's also interaction with the lymphatic system, or the gut-associated lymphoid tissue. They think about 70% of our immune system is located in this gut-associated lymphoid tissue, through which the gut bacteria communicate and actually directly affects our immune system. So you can just imagine, if you're eating a bunch of things that you're not supposed to eat, what kind of an effect it can have on your immune system. And and this eventually leads to inflammation, which is sent to the brain. The brain then registers this. And for those of you who don't know, most of our hormones or hormone secretion is then controlled by the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus, which is located inside the brain. So once all of those messages come from the gut, it actually stimulates the hypothalamus and the pituitary and regulates the hormone secretion that comes from the brain. And that's eventually when you get hormonal imbalances, you get insulin resistance, you get the layman's term that they call adrenal burnout. And I mean, I've just covered about half of the pathology origins that you get in the body from an integrative perspective. So it's actually amazing. So there are so many ways through which the gut communicates with the brain, and then the brain also, it in a way controls the functioning of the gut, and then the gut also controls the functioning of the brain. So emotions and mental function can control your gut function, and gut function then sends a message back and controls the brain function. So it's a bidirectional communication system. It's not only one way, unfortunately. And I think many people, or most people that I actually see has had some other form of IBS in their lives, and then they go to the doctor, and the doctor says, it's stress related, and send you to the dietitian, and you guys need to give them diet plans. So it's actually, it's not only stress. I mean, it can be that the insult was from the gut, which was sent to the brain, causing stress, worsening the gut insult. So it's absolutely a bidirectional thing here.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, I've heard that most of the information is actually carried from the digestive tract to the brain. There's actually more information going from the gut to the brain. I don't know if you agree with this, but that's exactly why they say, or why many researchers call the gut the second brain, like you said, right?
Yes.
So, is it true, just focusing a bit more on like the feel-good hormones, so focusing a bit on serotonin, is it true that most of the serotonin is produced in the gut as well? And I'm also aware of quite a bit of research saying that, you know, or showing the effect that probiotics have, making the receptors in the brain more responsive to neurotransmitters, you know, and actually improving the mood of depressed patients. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, look, the research, especially on the serotonin secretion by the gut affecting the brain, is still a little bit unclear, although they're kind of still trying to figure out whether the gut bacteria is trying to talk to us or whether we're trying to talk to the gut bacteria through the serotonin production. But it's not only actually just the serotonin that's secreted. They also secrete dopamine, they secrete GABA, multiple vitamins and minerals, short-chain fatty acids. There are so many things that they secrete. And eventually, through all the pathways that we've prescribed or described now, they reach the brain, or they have a direct or an indirect effect on the brain. The problem that we see when it comes to especially these neurotransmitters circulating back and forth is with when patients have hyperpermeable gut membrane. So when they've had an inflamed gut for a long time, and some of the substances that are not supposed to seep into the bloodstream through the gut. I don't know how many people listening to us have heard of leaky gut, but basically leaky gut, go read up on it. It's very interesting. You get almost like a supercharged amount of these neurotransmitters flooding through into the brain, because as the gut lining becomes hyperpermeable, you also get the blood-brain barrier that protects the brain also becomes hyperpermeable. And the tricky thing with the serotonin secretion with the gut bacteria comes with the different species of bacteria located in the gut. Okay, so what they found in research is that people presenting with mental health disorders actually had the same deficiency of microbes in their gut. So that's why it's important to make sure that you eat a variety of foods to encourage growth of a large variety of bacterial species or microorganisms in your gut, to have that balance of the neurotransmitters, because if you have too much of one thing, it's always a bad thing. So do they secrete serotonin? Yes, they do. How much do they secrete? It depends on your microbial balance inside your gut. So that's ultimately the most important thing.
Okay. And then the role of the probiotics, what do you think?
Okay, so probiotics, we've kind of pushed it over the past couple of years. I've become a little bit careful with just prescribing a probiotic, okay? Because if you don't know the exact colony of microorganisms in that patient's stool, you could actually be putting fuel on the fire. So it's tricky to determine exactly what they need in terms of probiotics. So as a rule of thumb, or just to stay clear and keep it budget friendly with most of my patients, I would rather recommend that they eat a healthy diet and a large amount of fiber in the diet, more than 50 grams of fiber a day, because bacteria ultimately feed on fiber and a phytonutrient. So a phytonutrient is something that gives a vegetable a certain color. So you must make sure that you have, I'm sure you can elaborate more on this, but a large, like eat the rainbow, the more color, the better, the more fiber, the better, because you actually want to encourage a spontaneous rebalancing of the gut bacteria to make sure that you have the right amounts for your body. Yeah, so an interesting fact regarding the specific gut bacteria and what I said about people with mental health disorders presenting with the kind of the same microbiome is that they've done animal to or human to animal studies. They're still busy with the human to human studies. And what they did is they took laboratory mice and and people with, it was Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and ADHD, and they took fecal samples from those patients, and they basically planted it into the lab mice. And what they saw was that the mice started developing the symptoms of either the Parkinson's or the Alzheimer's patient or the person with ADHD. And that's kind of where they thought, well, hell, maybe the microbiome is actually much more important than we thought. Mm-hmm. So yes, that's why it's difficult to really say that a certain person might need a certain bacteria, because some bacterial species or especially fungal species like the Saccharomyces species can kill off Candida in the gut. And so it can be a very nice therapeutic tool, but you kind of have to know what you're dealing with before you over colonize a certain bacterial species, because you might just worsen the problem.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so I want to make this really practical, and you already mentioned quite a few things, but is there anything else you'd like to add in terms of how to practically manage your mood and establish a strong microbiome? And if you don't mind, I also just want you to touch on the use, or perhaps rather the overuse of antibiotics in the medical field, and what the effect is of this.
Yeah, so the problem that we have with antibiotics is that they don't really just kill the bacteria that you want to get rid of. They kill all of the bacteria, and they also kill the cell that contains that bacteria that you want to get rid of. So you cause a depletion, a complete depletion of the microbiome and any normal bacterial flora contained on the body or in the body. And you also cause intrinsic inflammation by tissue damage from the bacteria, killing those cells containing the bacteria. So do I believe antibiotics are necessary? Absolutely. But in certain situations, it's very rare that I will prescribe an antibiotic for the common cold or flu unless someone really has a high fever and you can see, shame, this person's really struggling to get over this infection. So I always try to push natural means of dealing with an infection. But I mean, it's become common practice that people are prescribing or are prescribed antibiotics, then they complete the course, and then they're most likely resistant to that antibiotic because of years and years of use of the same antibiotics. Then they get another one. And I mean, it's not uncommon for people to get 3 different kinds of antibiotics for the common cold. And I mean, then that person didn't even present with a fever once. So yeah, it's a problem, and especially in young kids and in babies who kind of have to still establish their microbiome colony or ecosystem, if I can put it that way, because that ultimately determines that person's immune system in the future. And now everyone's being pumped full of antibiotics, depleting bacteria everywhere, and then we have poor diets. So it's kind of like a snowball effect that just doesn't stop unless you actually know of better. And the sad thing is that many people don't know of better, and we actually only discovering the research now as to why we need to kind of treat patients differently, why patients need to be educated in a different way, why we kind of need to have a black and white turnaround with our lifestyles. So it's hard. It's hard if you've been hearing the same thing for decades, and now all of a sudden all this new research is coming up and everyone has to change their ways. You know, a young tree bends easily, but an old tree not so much. So
and it's convenient, right? It's convenient to take some antibiotics instead of maybe changing your diet or taking
unfortunately, we live in a quick fix era.
Exactly.
And it's not, this one's not a quick fix, and many times people often feel worse before they feel better. If I get a patient who's been living on McDonald's for the past 2 years and you tell them to eat 2 bowls of broccoli, I mean, that person is going to have gas for days. They're going to hate you for 2 months, and maybe eventually they will feel better. But I mean, those are the changes that people need to get used to, and it takes time and frustration, and sometimes something needs to get worse before it gets better. But it's basically just re-educating the population on what's supposed to happen.
Yes, exactly. Do you have any other tips that you would recommend in terms of improving our mental health or improving our microbiome?
Yeah, so my foundation that I always go to is diet. I usually, the first thing that I do when I see a patient for the first time is we do elimination diet to see what they can and can't tolerate, to minimize the inflammatory load, because as soon as you minimize the inflammation coming into the body, you can start treating the existing inflammation that's already established. So diet number one, eat a wide variety of foods. I can scream when I get a patient who comes to me and says, but doctor, I've tried every single diet that there is. And then it's all these fad diets, and they've been eating the same breakfast, lunch, and supper for 10 years. And okay, not so much, maybe a year or 6 months, but it doesn't help. So they eat a wide variety of foods. Don't cut out nutrients. Don't cut out macronutrients. Make sure that you feed your microbiome. Eat enough fiber. If you don't get enough fiber, or you think that you don't get enough fiber, track what you eat throughout the day. Try to get 50 grams of fiber. If you eat I think it's about 500 grams of raw vegetables a day, you should get to about 50 grams. I don't know, I think you would be able to give me an accurate answer there, but I think it's around about 500 grams of raw vegetables that you can cook, or you can have it in salads, but just make sure that you get enough natural fiber. If you're someone with a fussy gut, go for your soluble fibers over your insoluble fibers. So all brands, not necessarily the best choice. Stick to something like sweet potatoes, your yellow and your orange vegetables. They are often a lot softer or less harsh on the digestive system, and keep your gut bacteria happy. Number two that I always preach is to try and get the mind calm, especially with us women. I've seen that if we are overstressed and we're running around and trying to organize everything, and you don't get to like self-care, your hormones do not love you. Okay. And inflammation skyrockets, you will gain weight. So men and women, go for daily walks, get out in nature, take some downtime, keep the mind zen. Sleep, sleep, sleep. If you don't sleep, sleep contributes 30% of your health. If you don't get enough sleep, your diet can be perfect, your exercise routine can be perfect, you can relax all you want during the day, but if you don't sleep, your body doesn't recover, and it can't get rid of the inflammation or the toxin load. Yes, I think that's about, it's quite simple, but I mean, it's very hard to execute for people. So those are usually my foundational things that I preach.
Oh, no, those are great. And I can absolutely agree with getting enough sleep. And I'm actually currently reading Matt Walker's book, Why We Sleep. Excellent book. I can really recommend it. And he actually did a study with a sleep-deprived group of people, and he did some brain scans. And it showed over 60% amplification in emotional reactivity when they were shown like negative images when compared to obviously a group that did sleep well. So he says that you can really, if you improve sleep quality in patients suffering from, mental health issues, you can improve symptom severity and remission rates even. So it's quite revolutionary as well. And it's such a simple thing, right? So we're just not going.
And who sleep nowadays? No one. We don't sleep.
Exactly.
There's always another Netflix episode to watch.
Exactly. And I mean, sleep really is the best, like he says, it's the best bridge between despair and hope is a good night's sleep, and I can absolutely testify of that. So
yeah, true.
Yeah. So I just want to quickly share just a few tips from my side, from a nutritional point of view, and Dr. Maricia already mentioned quite a few things, and I agree with all of it. But 5 quick tips that I'll give you is number 1 would be to limit and avoid the processed foods, right? So unfortunately, they are pro-inflammatory, and not only do they cause inflammation, they also in some cases promote deficiencies of some of the essential nutrients, especially like the omega-3s and the magnesium. So eating as natural as you can. And I know, once again, this is a convenience issue. So often it's so easy to just grab something off the shelf instead of having to cook something. But this could make such a huge difference in your life. And if you're wondering, but what is a processed food? What exactly should I be avoiding? A good question you can ask yourself is, would your great-grandmother recognize what you're eating as food? So if you're reading the label, the list of ingredients on the back of a package, what does it say? Is it potato or apple or something like that? That's food. But often there's mostly chemicals or some weird number. That's not food. That's food-like substances. So by only focusing on that, you can really improve inflammation or reduce inflammation and really improve your mental health. Okay, secondly, I would recommend looking a bit at balancing blood sugar. And there's a very direct link between mood and blood sugar balance. So I'm not going to go into detail right now as to how to do that, but I've got a video on my YouTube channel. You can just search Zena le Roux, which really explains in detail how you can do this. Once again, this is in order to reduce inflammation. We're just trying to reduce the inflammation as much as possible. And this is because the inflammation, like Dr. Maricia explained, escapes into the systemic circulation, right? And this goes to the brain, triggering all types of inflammatory responses. Thirdly, I would recommend limiting gluten. And there's many different things that you could be sensitive to, but gluten is something that I see kind of most people have some type of reaction to. And there's a substance in gluten called zonulin. And zonulin damages the lining of the gut. It kind of just opens up the gut lining. And this is what we absolutely do not want, because it triggers the immune system and causes more inflammation. So now many people are telling me, but my grandmother ate gluten all the time. She ate bread 3 times a day, ate pasta all the time, and she's very healthy. She turned 95. So what's the problem? So there's a lot of things that changed since then, firstly. So the wheat strains changed quite a bit over the past few decades. And the way they prepared the wheat was completely different. So they had time. So they soaked the grains and they, took the whole day to bake the bread. So something like a sourdough bread is actually much better for digestion than some, bread that was baked in 1 hour. So unfortunately, once again, the convenience. So we were looking for quick fixes, and this affects our gut health in many different ways. Okay, and then, number 4 would be, there are some minerals that are crucial when it comes to mental health, and this is because they actually help create the enzymes that produce our neurotransmitters. Once again, I'm not going to go into too much detail as to where you can find them. You can easily Google this, but the few most important ones I want to mention are iron and zinc, magnesium, and your B vitamins. And like Dr. Maricia said, this is not necessarily a case of having to go and find those specific foods, but if you are focusing on variety in your diet, you will get more nutrients into your diet. And exactly, I see exactly that same thing where people eat the same thing for breakfast every single day. It's safe. They know it's predictable. I don't know exactly why, but
I would literally die of boredom.
Yes, exactly. Variety is key. Once our microbiome needs variety, and we need all of these different nutrients. So there are actually some experts, but I find this to be a little bit extreme, but there are some experts that recommend that we should have around 40 different whole plant foods per week. At least this does include herbs and spices as well, but so you know what to aim for. Okay, and then lastly, eating a bit more fermented foods. So I would start out slowly with this because, like Dr. Maricia mentioned, if you have dysbiosis or if there's a lot of bad bacteria in your stomach, you might react weirdly to this. So I would recommend maybe starting with a tablespoon or less fermented foods per day, and these include your yogurts, kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir, kombucha, things like that. Okay, so that's it from me. Is there anything else you'd like to maybe add on the topic or kind of leave our viewers with, Dr. Maricia?
Yeah, a nice thing that, it's like dietary change many times become overwhelming to people, and figuring out what they're allowed to eat, what they're not allowed to eat. And I usually tell them, if you can grow it, and if it has a mother, you can eat it.
I love that. Yeah.
So you can't grow anything in a box. You can't. I'd like to see them try, but so it's a quick thing that they could just scan through the grocery aisles and, can I grow this? Does this have a mother? If it does, it's fine, you can eat it.
Yes, I love that. Okay. Yeah, thank you for joining us today, and thank you so much for your extremely valuable insights, Dr. Maricia, and we both wish you all the very best in health and happiness, and thank you so much for joining us.